let you know when it started. Okay, the recording started. Councillor Brennan, if you want to start the meeting.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to July's Ward Forum meeting for Sparkhill. Just to let everybody know, the meeting is being recorded and it will be streamed on YouTube. So if anybody has any issue with being on YouTube, please let me know now. And people are allowed to take photographs and videos of the meeting. So nobody has any issue. It's quite a busy agenda, so I'm going to get on with it as soon as I possibly can. So do we have any apologies at all?
I haven't received any, no.
Okay, lovely. Okay, we'll move on to our first item, which is an update on COVID from Public Health. And we're very, very lucky to have Justin Varney with us this evening. So I'm going to pass over to Justin to talk to you about our COVID update.
Great, thanks, Councillor. So I thought I'd give you a brief overview. I'm on two screens, so that's why you're going to get fabulous side beard as I have to read my notes on a slightly separate screen. But overall, what we're seeing at the moment is that the case rate in the city is starting to come down. Now, it is too early to really say that that's a true descent because overall testing rates have come down as well. But there are some early signs that the percentage of tests that are positive is falling as well. But we probably need about 3 or 4 more days data to be confident. What we think is happening in terms of why the case rate's coming down is there are 2 factors at play. One, the vaccine. So the vaccine is very good at stopping you getting very sick, stopping you ending up in hospital. It's not perfect at stopping you catching the disease, but if you do catch COVID, it reduces the amount you can spread it. So what we're starting to see is the vaccine does have an impact on transmission. The other thing that's important to say is the vaccine also seems to reduce the chance of developing long COVID, which for younger people is a really good reason to have the vaccine because we are seeing quite a lot of young adults end up with long COVID and it's a really nasty condition. So the case rate up to, I'm just looking on my notes for this one. So the case rate in Birmingham's running about 425 cases per 100,000. It's about a 25% reduction to the week before. Our highest case rates are in our 0 to 19 and 20 to 39 age group. So in young adults and particularly in secondary school age children, it's that kind of teen and young adult group where the virus has been spreading a lot. Now, looking at Sparkhill, where you're at the moment, up to the 26th of July, Sparkhill ranked 27th out of the 69 wards in the country, in the city, where 1's got the highest rate and 69 the lowest. And the rate in Sparkhill was around 290 cases per 100,000. There are 12 COVID champions in the ward, which is really good news. And really grateful for those 12 helping to share information. You can still sign up as a COVID champion on the council website. And that's really important as we come into the winter, because what we expect that will happen is that case rates will slow down over the summer. We're all out while the weather's nice, windows are open, good ventilation going on. All of that reduces transmission. But as the winter closes in, we go indoors more, we mix indoors more, that the virus will spread more. We also think this winter will be a bad flu winter because we've had 2 years without flu really because of COVID. Everything that we do to stop COVID spreading stops flu spreading. And so our natural immunity to flu has really worn off. And the other concern is there's a thing called RSV, which is a virus that respiratory virus in children, and that has also fallen down during COVID because what stops COVID stops other respiratory viruses. And what we've seen in Australia at the moment is a very, very rapid increase in RSV in children. And RSV in children can be quite a nasty respiratory infection. So it's a very much a winter infection. And so what we're anticipating this winter is probably bad flu. So if you're eligible for the flu jab, go and get it as soon as it becomes available. probably a resurgence of surge in RSV in young children. There's not a lot we can do about RSV, unfortunately. There's not a vaccine that works well. So that is going to be about really keeping an eye out for the little ones. And then thirdly, there's a real risk of a COVID variant from other bits of the world that aren't as vaccinated. And that's why we'll have the booster program for COVID for the most elderly and the most vulnerable, because their immune systems are not as strong, and we want to give their kind of protection extra little top up. For everyone else, the 2 doses should give you really strong coverage. And we're seeing evidence from the Pfizer trials that strong coverage lasts more than a year. We'll start to see, hopefully, from the AstraZeneca trials, which are a bit longer because AstraZeneca came after Pfizer, but we're certainly, the initial findings are very positive as well. So you don't need a booster because the vaccine's wearing off. Where you'll need a booster is if you're someone who's got an impaired immune system. We know that vaccines in general are not as good for those people, so we want to boost it up. Looking at vaccine coverage in Sparkhill at the moment, running at about 82, 83% of your over 75-year-olds have had the jab. Amongst younger age groups, that's where we've really got a hill to climb. Only a third of over 18 to 29-year-olds have had the first jab so far. And that's quite a concern, actually, in terms of their vulnerability, particularly to long COVID. The data we've got from Sandwell and West Birmingham hospitals, the City Hospital, is all of the patients in intensive care are unvaccinated, the patients with COVID. And in the patients with COVID in general hospital beds, it's less than about 5% have had any vaccine. And the vast majority of those that have had a vaccine have only had 1 dose. So you need that 2 doses to give you protection. I suppose the final things to say are, there's lots of work going on vaccination at the moment. Vaccine buses popping up all over the place. GP practices offering extended hours. We are setting up services to support children that are eligible for the vaccine to get it. So that's children over the age of 12 who've got specific conditions like Down syndrome, epilepsy, cerebral palsy, for example, or if they live in a household with someone that's immunocompromised. And that would mean someone that was, for example, going through chemotherapy or took high dose steroids for perhaps rheumatoid arthritis, those kind of conditions. So if you have children in your house and you fit those categories, then please talk to your GP, and the GPs are going to be the main route of vaccination for the children. But it will come online over August. We're still waiting for some of the clinical protocols to come through. Ultimately, where we are at the moment is COVID's not changed. It's still dangerous. It's still putting people in the hospital. It's still creating long COVID. All that changed on the so-called Freedom Day was that the fines disappeared. The disease didn't change. And it's really important that we keep up with testing regularly, preferably twice a week if you're an adult. And we keep up with hand, face and ventilate. And ventilation is probably the key bit that changed over this year, is we learned that COVID acts a bit like cigarette smoke. You remember when someone puffs out a foul cloud of cigarette smoke? This is where my public health prejudice comes in. And it kind of floats in the air. If it's a still day, that cloud can just sit there. If it's a windy day, it all disperses and you can't see it after a minute or two. Well, COVID does the same thing. When it comes out of your mouth, if you're not wearing a face covering, those droplets can hang in the air like a cloud of cigarette smoke. If you've got a well-ventilated room, windows open, fan going, doors opening, that cloud gets broken up, and that means the risk to other people is really reduced. So that's why the ventilation is really important. It's why being outside is better than being inside. I think you will see a lot of businesses, including the council, being quite cautious over August and September while we're still waiting for those vaccination numbers to go up. You know, people are being sensible and pragmatic about what we can do. And not rushing to throw away all of the COVID safety measures. And I would ask people to respect that. And you know, Transport for West Midlands have committed to continuing to promote face coverings on buses and on the tram system. They can't force people to wear them, but they can encourage them, which is what we're continuing to do. And as I said, I think my prediction, and it is a crystal ball, is that the summer will be relatively okay. However, the NHS, the impact on the hospitals runs about 3 to 4 weeks after what happens in the community. So the numbers coming down now won't really impact on the NHS for about another 2 to 3 weeks. So they've still got another hill to climb, and that will mean that people who are waiting for hip operations, all of those things, might end up getting bumped back because there aren't intensive care beds there. There aren't hospital beds there. So the ask of everyone is, if you've not had your jab, go get your jab because it's safe. The risks from the vaccine are less than the risks from the contraceptive pill when it comes to clotting. You've got more risk of being killed in a car crash driving to London than you have getting a serious clot from any of the vaccines. And your risk of dying from COVID or ending up severely ill or ending up with long COVID is higher from COVID than it is the risk of getting a clot from the vaccine. We're doing what we can to debunk some of the myths. There's some scary, bad science around things like fertility risk, where someone looked at a picture of a placenta, the surface of a placenta cell and the surface of a coronavirus in a textbook and went, oh, they look the same. They don't. They're completely different. It's just the way we draw them look similar. And unfortunately, that led to a myth that vaccines affected fertility. So we're doing what we can as public sector to debunk that, to help answer people's questions, to give them confidence. But my ask to anyone watching and listening tonight is, if you know friends that aren't vaccinated, get them to talk to a healthcare professional, get them to go and see their pharmacist, ring up their GP, attend one of the seminars that the NHS are putting on and get their questions answered. Because if that number of 300,000 stays stuck where it is, that's the number of people in Birmingham who aren't vaccinated at the moment. That is enough to cripple the NHS. Yeah, and that's the bit we've got to keep in mind. This is about protecting ourselves, but it's also about making sure that hospital beds aren't blocked. So people that need hip operations, cancer treatment, heart operations can get them because there isn't a COVID patient stuck in their bed. So it's a bit about protect yourself and it's a bit about protect everyone else, and keep up with hand, space, face and ventilate. Be sensible this summer and hopefully we'll get some sun to enjoy. I'm happy to take any questions, Councillor Brennan. I know that's been a bit of a canter, but I'm conscious of your time tonight and I hope it's given you a bit of an insight of what's going on in the ward.
Thank you, Justin. I'll just add on to that Hall Green Library have got a walk-in vaccination centre and that's open on the 2nd, 5th and 6th of August. So I'll just see if we have any questions from residents. Just raise your hand or pop that you want to speak into the chat. It's not looking like we do. That's a first for you, Justin.
It may just mean I'm getting better at covering all the bases.
Okay, we can let you go. Oh no, we've got a question from Abdul.
Hi, Justin. I'm just wondering, with obviously with the kids breaking up from school, that they're saying that there's a link where the actual positive cases have come down. So in terms of when they go back to school, is it a case, obviously we're hitting the sort of winter, autumn stuff, and is it a case of we're going to be seeing an increase around then, and obviously what's going to be sort of taking place in school, so we can obviously try and reduce that as much as possible?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what's interesting at the moment is what we see in schools is that the transmission doesn't really seem to be happening in schools. It's just we find it in schools because the testing happens linked to kids going to school, and then the schools join the dots for us. They help with the contact tracing. And even when we've had large clusters of kids in the same school, what we've generally found is someone had a birthday party or there's been a whole load of sleepovers, and that's what's been driving it. So school in itself is actually quite a safe environment for kids. but we do detect it because kids come to school and they test, and then we find out what's going on. So there is a risk that over the summer we will see infections in children continue, but we won't be able to see it because we're not testing children as regularly, and that they become the reservoir for the virus. Now, what government's wrestling with about vaccinating children is that because it's 2 injections, we don't want to put children through the trauma of injections that they don't need. The evidence base globally is about 1 in 68,000 children who have COVID die. Now, that's actually not that low when you compare it to other conditions. It's certainly more common than, say, measles or mumps deaths, and we vaccinate for those things. But that's globally, and the problem is if you look at the UK figures, actually child deaths are much lower because our general health of our children is better. What we don't know yet is whether long COVID happens in children, and I think there's quite a lot of looking at that over the summer, because if there comes decent evidence that long COVID affects children, I think the government will move its position to vaccinating children and doing it pretty fast at the beginning of the autumn term. But we're still waiting on some of the science. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll see some of the reports come through. The government strategy basically is to say, if we vaccinate all the parents and COVID remains low risk to children's health, then we will see a rise in September when children go back to school, but it doesn't really matter because the parents are all vaccinated. So that's the kind of balancing act. If I think, if we start to see evidence over the summer that children get long COVID, then I think government might have to change its strategy, and we would start to see vaccination of children for COVID in the autumn. Schools, the guidance for schools is still coming through, still changing. Our expectation is that schools will return pretty much to normal in September on the basis that all the parents should be vaccinated by then with 2 doses. So the parents are much more at risk, so they're protected. But as I say, this might all change if we see more evidence of COVID affecting children, because it changes the dynamic. And we are continually nagging the department and saying, you do realise that head teachers and teachers need a bit of time off over the summer. So could we not have guidance like 3 days before term starts? But unfortunately, that's what we've had through most of the pandemic, and I fear we may well get this time as well. Does that make sense?
It does. I've got one follow-up question to that. Obviously, what's happening with the pingdemic, should we call it? In terms of schools, if it's obviously we're having kids, myself in school, and then we get that phone call, come and pick your kid up, we'll isolate for 10 days. Is there going to be a system where maybe they can test every day, and where they're obviously say negative and go into work, as they're thinking about doing with the sort of key workers and stuff like that?
Yeah. So it's called daily contact testing. DCT is the name. So there've been a trial on this in several schools. We did have one in Birmingham, but we had to stop the trial because there were so many kids that tested positive. And actually, it was a really good example of that. Wasn't because of what the school was doing. It was because someone had a really good party and the kids had all mingled and spread the virus. So what I think we will see in the autumn is that, and probably this is what we will start to see for most people after August, actually, when they change the rules on isolation, is if you are an adult and you're vaccinated, you won't have to isolate, but you may well need to test 2 or 3 times during that 10-day period you would have isolated. In schools, in secondary school children, they would test at school. So they go into school, they do the test when they get there, and if that test is negative, they can stay at school. If it's not, they go home. Now, that's not necessarily the most logical way of doing it, and we have pointed out to DfE it would be better if the kids tested at home, because then the parents don't have to bring them in and take them back. So there's still a bit of argy-bargy going on about that. Primary school children is a bit more difficult, and any of you who are parents of 5 or 6 year olds will know that doing a nasal swab or a throat swab on a 5 or 6 year old is not fun. and doing it for 10 days in a row I'd probably rather actually just live with the isolation and stay home to look after them. But you know, I think with primary school children, they've got to do a bit more thinking through, because it is that just reality of swabbing a 6 or 7 year old for 10 days in a row is not nice. It's not great for secondary school kids either, but you know, I think they got a better understanding of it. So I think primary school, we're not quite clear what they're going to do. Secondary school, I think we will see this DCT program roll out. I think we will also see for adults after August it rolling out more commonly, provided people have had 2 doses of the vaccine. And that's the big caveat of all of this, is that it does depend on vaccination coverage improving. So that would be my crystal ball in terms of the testing, but government's still got to make some decisions. And the other thing to keep in mind is that, you know, there are only so many of those test kits available. When we did the push in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago on the areas which had low testing uptake and poor vaccination uptake, I think from memory, Councillor Brennan, Sparkhill was part of that enhanced support area, and we were going door to door offering testing kits. We consumed about 1/3 of the national supply of testing kits, because we needed such a large number in a short period of time. So one of the bits the government's also got to kind of work through is, if we did that for all children, have we got enough kits to supply it? And you know, it was a lot of test kits that we used, and we've got a lot of children, so we'd eat up a lot of kits. So I think there probably will be something like that, but it's crystal ball gazing at the moment rather than seeing any policy on it. So we should find out in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. I'm going to move us on now, just because I'm conscious of time. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. So now I am going to move on to a waste update from Les Williams.
Thank you, Councillor. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the invite again this evening. Just by way of a quick update, because I know time's against us. I had a question forward to the meeting to ask where Sparkhill was with reference to the dumping across the rest of the city. Sparkhill currently sits about number 8 out the 69 wards, so by far not the best, and by far, if I'm honest, not the worst. The worst ward, which I won't name in this meeting, is more than double what Sparkhill is. But we are putting things in place to try and tackle that. And some of the things that we've done or doing are, we've got some extra dumping crews. So the depot that services over in Tyseley, which services Sparkhill, they've got an extra 3 crews that have been brought into the area. Not specifically Sparkhill, but it will be servicing Sparkhill, obviously. And what they're going to be looking to do, or what they are currently doing, is driving around, looking at the hotspots, getting involved with waste enforcement when we can, to try and drive down the fly tipped and dump waste. Where we're seeing you being number 8 currently, should we say, once our exercises really kick off, we will definitely see a reduction in that, and on the league table, if we want to use that term, for Sparkhill. What we're also just putting in place, and hopefully they start in the next few days, is a regular sack crew. So where we've got, I use the Stratford Road as an example, where there's lots of flats above the shops. We're looking at why the flats are there, as in, are they storage or are they residences? And over time, we're going to identify if we can give people wheel bins or something else, another service. But while we carry that out, we're going to have these sack crews up and down the main roads. I don't know the frequencies yet. I'm sort of feeling about 3 times a week, removing any sack waste that's been put out, because obviously people living in the flats, there could be quite a few, and they've got nowhere to put their waste currently. So we're looking on a big fix for that. If we do get to a point where we're starting to see shop waste when we're picking it up, we're going to be backing that up with waste enforcement. And what waste enforcement will do is go in and speak to the shop, check out their duty of care. The duty of care is their license to hold waste, basically. If that's not sufficient, we will enforce they do. And anyone that doesn't comply, then we will look to prosecute. And it's not like it was in the past. You get a couple of free warnings and then we try and do something. We are moving into prosecution. So we do a brief education and then we go straight into enforcement. Now, we have done one recently on the Stratford Road, and it's a block of flats. It wasn't in Sparkhill. It was a little further down in Sparkbrook, and it was a company that continued to put their waste in the residents' skips or containers that we put out. We warned them. They carried on doing it. They received a fine the very next day for £400. That's now ceased, and the residents can now use the bins that were there, put there for them. So, we're being very, very proactive now, in as much as no nonsense. If people are going to use things that they shouldn't be using or just dump their waste if they're a shop, we're going to take proactive actions. Councillor and a couple of the resident groups, we went out on a walkabout probably about a month or so ago now, and we identified 1 or 2 issues. The main one, and the one we're looking at the moment, is the alleyway just up by Shakespeare Street, I think it is.
It's Stratford Road and Shalgreen Lane, Les.
Shalgreen Lane, sorry. It runs from Stratford Road to Shalgreen Lane. We're currently monitoring that. What we're looking at is who's dumping the waste there, because you've probably all seen it if you've been out and about shopping. And we're looking to identify if it's shop from the flats above the shops just there on the corner of Shalgreen Lane, or if it's the businesses, or indeed if it's the flats that are sit next to the alleyway the other side. So far, the information we're gaining is it's coming from the shops. So again, we're working on that proactively to take the actions we need to. Some of the other things that are coming along into the service, at the depot, they're going to have an extra graffiti crew. So if we're seeing graffiti, we'll be able to act a bit quicker to get it cleaned off. And a lot of that is around, we're going to be out a lot more, looking at what's going on, dealing with the issues. And then we're going to be doing some one-off visits to certain areas where the recycling is low. We've got a new truck segregates the waste. It's not run by refuse collection. It is run by us, but we're going to target some areas that are not able to recycle, because there might be on boxes still, because they can't have bins. It might be that they won't recycle, so we're going to try and teach people how to, and then give them the facilities to. When this vehicle comes out, there's a second one that comes as well, and what they'll do is the area we target, they will put a leaflet through your door probably the day before, and we'll be there to take away any bits of unwanted items like bric-a-brac. If you've got an old mattress that's been hanging around you want to get rid of, them guys there will come along and you'll bring it to us basically, but we'll take it away for you free of charge. So I haven't got one just yet in order for Sparkhill, but there will be one very shortly. And obviously we won't cover the whole of Sparkhill in one day. We're looking at our worst spots where we've got dumping, fly tipping, and low participation in recycling. I think that's just my brief update. If anyone's got any questions, I can see your hands up, Abdul. No?
Abdul, do you want to come in with your question?
Yeah, I just want to say, obviously, thanks to Les, because we did go out and there was a lot of residents obviously complaining about that alleyway, and we got it cleaned up. I think it's about a week after, 2 weeks after. I'm being obviously walking past there because on my route, sort of going and coming and going, and it's still clean, which is good. But I think the issue is the ongoing issue. The hotspot is at the bottom of Stratford Road, where people are dumping the bags there. So hopefully we'll, as you know, Les, we're in talks with the housing association. So hopefully we'll get something done there with that as well. The other quick one regarding the extra crews coming out. Do you know a rough idea when that might start?
The dumping crews have already started. The issues we're having at the moment, we've got the vehicles, or nearly all the vehicles. We've got the willingness to do it from managers. the problem we're having is there's a nationwide shortage of drivers. The government's changed the rules for drivers that can work longer hours. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, lots of that service industry were laid off and they've been found other jobs. So we are struggling to get drivers, but we're increasing our driver training regime within waste management. That does take a bit of time, but we're looking what we can do within ourselves to try and meet the hunger for these drivers to get them in place. It will come as soon as possible, and where we're looking on some of the other depots, whether we can Bexhill and Borough as well, because obviously some of our areas across the depot are a bit more needed than other areas. So we're working every way we can to get it out there as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Verena, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Les, I have a mouthful of questions, but I'll keep it very quick. In regards to road sweepers, obviously they seem to be held back due to COVID. I was wondering when these might be redeployed in the streets or what the plans are.
Yeah, so with our large mechanical sweepers, there is parts of Sparkhill that we can't actually sweep, down to lots of parked cars. And through COVID, we did again have a shortage of drivers because we had definitely 3 at the Redfern depot that had to isolate for 12 months. It is a specialist role. You can't just get any driver to drive them. We have now, we're back up to full force, and we've hired in some new sweepers because some of ours are a bit aged, like myself. So we've got 3 hired vehicles while we're in the process of procuring new ones. We're just looking at the maps now as we speak. So Stratford Road, as an example, that should be mainly swept on the channels 3 times a week, and that's what we're looking to. And we're looking to support the beat sweepers down there with a small mechanical sweeper, perhaps twice a week. So to get up all the, the bitter detritus and cigarette ends that people discard, just to make it look that bit cleaner. So it's all in a plan, and it should all be come to a place near you very soon.
Sure. And it's a good segue to the next question, which is about sort of scheduling on public bin and park bin collections, because at the moment we're finding the schedules are a bit more stretched. I guess, and I assume this is to do with again the drivers and the availability of drivers. At the moment, as you know, there are quite a number of volunteers litter picking. What we're observing at the moment is we do litter pick, but it's taking about 2 to 3 weeks on average for collections, which just makes, I think, your life more difficult in terms of collecting the mess that then turns out to be, so for example, rats that come and start creating more mess. So I was just wondering if this council are looking at the schedules of that as well.
Yeah, I do pick up what you're saying, Farina, and if the good members of the public want to come out and work with us or work on it alone and clear up the park or do some litter picking on around where they live, but there is another initiative that we're running called Love Your Streets, and the Love Your Streets initiative will supply you with litter pickers, we'll supply you with some sacks, and as long as you tell us when you're doing it, the litter picking that is, will come out either the same day or the very next day and clear any waste that you've accumulated. I'll dig out the contacts. I'm not sure if you've got a councillor, but if we get in line with them, they'll have open days, and if you want to get the local community involved, we can facilitate with tools and equipment, sacks, an hoop that goes around the sack so it keeps it rigid when it's open. And we can also organise the picking up of any waste. Now, what we have seen since the end of the last lockdown is the park use has gone astronomical. Quite rightly so, everybody's been locked up for 12 months and want to go and have a picnic and spend some family time in the parks. Parks are reacting to that as we speak. They're increasing their bin emptying schedules to meet that demand because the bins are pretty full pretty most of the time. So again, parks departments are looking at that.
Sure. And I feel like as if I'm hogging the call, so I think the next question I probably will skip just for now, purely because I think it's quite a broad question, but I'll leave it for you to possibly maybe answer in the next, probably the next call. I'll sort of just hand back over to Nicky, Councillor Nicky, sorry.
Thanks, Verena. I've got a hand up from Shab in the chat.
Hi, it was just a quick question in regards to Shell Green Lane. You mentioned that you're currently monitoring it just to kind of see what's going on. I was just wondering if you can go into a bit more detail and specifically say what you are actually doing to monitor.
Yes, Shab, I think just so I didn't misinterpret what I was saying, it's not Shoal Green Lane in itself, it's the alleyway that runs between Shoal Green Lane and the Stratford Road. So we're monitoring the alleyway. What we're finding is there's an alleyway within that alleyway which leads to the back of the shops and the flats above the shops. And if you've been down there, when we visited, there was a large amount of waste that had been put out in that alleyway, consisting of everything you could think of, from beds, mattresses, settees, bags of food waste, everything you could think of. And we're trying to identify who's putting it out so we can take the action, because people like to walk through there. It is a quick cut through rather than walk to the end of the Shoal Green Lane to get to Stratford Road through the shops. So it should be clean when you do so. So we're trying to identify who's doing it so we can take some proactive actions to stop it.
Sorry, I think you've misunderstood my question. And what I meant was that obviously I'm aware of the alleyway. I don't live too far from it. You mentioned that you're trying to work out like who's doing it and, you know, why is it a hot spot and whether it's the flats or who. My question was more in regards to not what's been done, but what are you doing in terms to identify who the culprits are? Because you mentioned that, you know, you're trying to find out who they are. How are you going about doing that?
Okay. Sorry, Shab.
No worries.
What we're doing is we're doing at least twice a week, we're visiting the site and we're looking at the waste and going into the waste to see what's there. I won't tell you what we found currently because it might scare some people who are standing. Nothing untoward, obviously, but we'll use that information to take forward with waste enforcement what we need to do. So it might be that one of the shops are using that rather than having a contract for their waste. And we're looking to go in to find that shop if that's what the case may be. So there's a couple of groups that we've had a walk around. Everyone's keeping in touch. Everyone's telling us what they're seeing, and what we're doing regular checks, and we're going to do that over a short period of time, and then we're going to take positive action. And it might be that if we don't identify part of our new ways of working, the waste enforcement team, which is increasing as well. One of them will be looking to put in the very worst areas in Birmingham cameras, and it might be that we catch them on camera rather than catch them by information that we gather from the investigations.
Thank you. I'm not sure if any nearby shops might have some sort of cameras that might actually cover that area. Has that been looked into at all?
Sorry, Shab, any shops in the area? What?
So opposite the alleyway, there's numerous shops and there's obviously other flats. Do any of their CCTV possibly can capture what's happening, or has it been the question been raised? Have they been looked at, those CCTVs around the area?
I think that's a good question, Shab, and I think it's something we might venture because yes, there are shops opposite that may have CCTV look on their frontages. If we find something stumped, I think moving forward, because at the moment, as discussed, it's been a bit quiet, it's been clean, but we'll use everything we possibly can, and if that shopkeeper wants to give us that information, we'll act upon that, obviously.
Thank you.
I think we've got time for one more question, if anybody else wants to ask a question. Verena?
I thought, since I'm not hogging the meeting anymore, if I could just go back to the question I missed, which is what sort of selection process is the council using with the new budget in regards to the CCTV for hotspots for where fly tipping is very common, of which one has already been mentioned?
It's probably, I may have answered this slightly, Farina, that it's part of sticking a camera up in a road that's not dumped upon. Obviously, every bit of dumping we pick up is managed, monitored and recorded. And we got some real bad places. The alleyway was quite bad, but it's by far not the worst. And we will triage it. We'll go for the worst culprits firstly, but in every ward, there is somewhere we need to look at. And I don't want to say, but Sparkhill's got one or two issues we need to look at. And that alleyway being one in question. There is a couple of other places that we need to look at as well. So it'll be triaged by the need, but the alleyway is one, in my view, has got the need.
Sorry, Les, does that mean that the selection process will be just by a case basis? There isn't a sort of an overall sort of plan?
Yes, there is an overall plan, obviously, but then you're probably right, it is case by case, and we will look at the worst bits first, the worst areas. So if we got a corner of a road where we get 2 black bags once a week, that wouldn't dictate it. But if we got a corner of a road where there's 40 bags and a settee and a mattress being dumped, that might come further up the triage list to deal with that first, because once you start hitting the big spots, the little spots start to dissipate on their own because people see that you're active, and people learn by seeing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Les for his time this evening and for all his hard work in Sparkhill. I'm sure he'll be out soon with us for another walk around to have a look at some of the grot spots, and I'll invite him to another ward forum in the later part of the year. Just so everybody knows as well, I'll let everyone know when the mobile recycling truck is coming to Sparkhill and where it will be. So we'll have lots of notice of that too. So thank you, Les. And we're now going to move on to our next agenda item, which is an update on the Sparkhill Flag Group. And Hannah Baker from Groundworks have come to speak to us this evening. So I'll pass over to you now, Hannah.
That's great. Thanks very much, Councillor Nicky, and thanks all for inviting me to be part of this meeting this evening. I have a short presentation to share with you, so I'm just going to share my screen now. One moment, please. So I hope you can all see my screen okay. My name's Hannah Baker and I am the programme manager for a programme called Communities Prepared, and we've been involved in setting up the local flood action group in Sparkhill, so that's why I'm here today. So some of you may be familiar with the term flag or flood action group and others may not, so I just wanted to give a bit of an overview in terms of what that even means. Basically, if there are flags, flood action groups around the country, and they tend to often be groups of local residents and businesses who are really keen to kind of help protect their area from their local area from flooding. And so this Sparkhill Flood Action Group has been set up locally with that in mind. And they're always made up of volunteers, and often you will get involvement from local businesses or local authorities, or a mixture of other kind of stakeholders as well, but volunteers that are really helping to kind of prepare for instances of flooding and also cope with the impacts of them too. So yeah, this one, as I said, we've got involvement from Birmingham City Council and from the Environment Agency, and also with support from Indestructible Paints as well, who are obviously based locally in Sparkhill and have felt the effects of flooding themselves over the years too. It was set up as part of the Communities Prepared programme, but following on from support that has been provided by the National Flood Forum in the past, which some of you may be familiar with. Just to tell you who we are, so as I said, the Communities Prepared programme is my role. I manage that programme overall, and it's run by a charity called Groundwork. Groundwork has offices across the country, but we do have offices in Birmingham, multiple offices in Birmingham, in fact. So we've very much got local staff on the ground who know the local community, know the local areas, and have lots of good connections locally. And in general, the programme offers training and support for flood warden groups or community emergency volunteers, as they're sometimes called. And through that training, we really hope that we can help people kind of develop knowledge and understanding of flooding and other incidents, and really help to kind of prepare for and recover from those sorts of emergencies. And we do have a website, the link's here, and obviously I can make sure that I share a copy of this presentation afterwards if people want to be able to kind of follow the links afterwards. But we share lots of resources on that website, as well as news and blogs and event information. So there's lots to have a look at on there if you want to in your own time. Just in terms of the flag in Sparkhill, the kind of setup has been quite recent, but it's very much been under discussion for a while. So we were having conversations back in 2019 with partners like those listed here. And yeah, the National Flood Forum was doing some work with local community members, which some of you may be familiar with, but in advance of 2019. And then the funding that they had was sort of coming to an end. So we had discussions with the Flood Forum to see whether it might be something we could help kind of pick up and support through our programme, for which we've had national lottery funding for. So yeah, working with the Environment Agency and Birmingham City Council, we put together a bit of a proposal or a plan to see, you know, what the community might like to do and how we might be able to support that. But then obviously we couldn't get very far before COVID hit. So yeah, in early 2020, we had one meeting at Indestructible Paints with some members of the community and with the Environment Agency as well. We were just starting to kind of put some plans in place when everything had to be postponed. So whilst there's been some things going on in the background, most recently in the spring of this year, a Facebook page was set up, and at the minute it's hosted by Groundwork. But obviously, as I note here, it's very much ready to be handed over to the community if there's anyone interested in doing that and becoming part of the flag. And I'll explain a bit more about how you can get involved in a moment. And then, yeah, there obviously was a walk around last month in June, sort of chatting to some local residents and sharing some posters and postcards about the flag. So that's happened already, but obviously at the moment we're then looking at what kind of plans we can put in place to do more of that and meet more members of the community in due course. And yeah, excitingly, we've had some funding locally, which means we can now have a member of staff in place with a part-time role specifically around supporting the flag and other local communities in and around Birmingham and actually across the West Midlands. So there's some really good opportunities to kind of help support communities locally around flooding and other kind of emergency resilience. So I mentioned here Abby Rees from Groundwork. She would have loved to have been able to be here this evening doing this presentation, but she had other commitments, which is why I'm here. But she's very much keen to chat to people, and you'll see later on in my presentation her contact details. So in terms of what a flood action group actually does, I mean, it really varies depending on what's needed locally. And you as local residents may well have some ideas for what you think it should do, and we'd love to hear them. But it's very much recognising the fact that you know your area better than anyone else, and obviously have great potential to support the community. So here's some of the things that flags tend to do. Flood alerts are really key, obviously, in terms of being aware of the flood risk in the area and getting notified when flooding may be imminent, so that you can then prepare and you know, whether that might mean moving furniture or even having to get out of the house, you have that time to prepare. Identifying vulnerable residents who may struggle to manage the flood themselves, whether that's perhaps they need help moving furniture, or whether they might be the kind of people that might need help getting medicine or other needs in the event of a flood. Creating community emergency or flood plans is obviously really important too. Generally sharing information and providing emergency services with local knowledge and information too. And obviously providing support to the community following a flood. But I have to say, obviously, we're well aware it's certainly not just down to the community to do any of this, and not just down to a flag to do any of this, but it's about how the local flag can work together with the emergency services and other key people to ensure that in an emergency things are kind of managed as well as possible. So there's no expectation on a flag to be doing anything that another organisation's obviously responsible for. And obviously there's lots of opportunities to link into other community groups and networks too, and you as local residents will be aware of what kind of groups are out there, but obviously working together often makes things easier to achieve more. And obviously in the local area, many of you will be aware it's really important to have a flag, because there is a significant flood risk, and there has been flooding not too long ago, back in May 2018, for those of you that were living in Sparkhill at that point. And over the autumn, winter in general, there's reports of localised flooding in gardens and things like that as well. So that's why it's so important to have a group like this set up. And obviously the impacts of climate change in the future may well mean that this risk worsens, not just in Sparkhill, but in many areas across the country. So there's a few areas just noted here where there are risks locally. And on the right there, you'll just see there's a local flood risk map, which comes from the gov.uk website, and I'll share a link to that later on the presentation too. And here's some of the reasons why it might be worth joining the flag. So it's all about building confidence and learning new things and developing new skills. And it's a great opportunity to meet new people as well. I think, members of these kind of community groups often spend time doing things that aren't just to do with, flooding, but it might well just be a good sociable opportunity as well to get together, especially once we all feel safer to do so in a sort of a COVID world, helps form sort of better connections too. And through Communities Prepared, because we've got this funding, we obviously can provide free training and support to the flag as well, which is hopefully a good opportunity there. And this is some of the kind of training that we offer. So we tend to start with a bit of an introduction to what we mean by emergency response and what the different kind of organisations involved in emergency response do, and then we offer training around things like flooding or other issues that might be relevant to a particular area. So as it notes here, we've got resources around snow, utilities failure, and public health, which we developed early last year in line with the pandemic getting underway. So we developed quite a lot of advice and resources around how to safely support the community during the pandemic as well. Communities Prepared has been developing these resources over a number of years, but we also always link into kind of other work that's out there, other programs and initiatives that have been doing similar things. So we're kind of sharing and collaborating and learning from each other. And very much this training is all aimed at the community level, though we do also work with community resilience professionals as well. Just the last couple of slides from me. So it's well worth signing up to the Environment Agency's flood warning services I've mentioned before, and there's a link here. And there's also a few different flood alert and weather apps that you can access too. So even on a personal level, if you're just interested to know about your own home and the risk to where you live, or you're interested in supporting wider community, there's options to do both here. Here's also some useful contacts. As I mentioned, that top one there is how you can check the longer term flood risk for where you live, and there's some contacts for the Environment Agency here too, and where you can report incidents as well. And as I said, I'll share these slides with Councillor Brennan afterwards, so you can you don't have to take a note of all of this information now. And then finally, as I said, we'd love obviously everyone to get involved with the flag, whoever's interested to find out more. These contact details here, the email address, and then the Facebook page is how you can get hold of Abby, who I mentioned earlier, and she'd be more than happy to chat to anyone. She lives locally and knows the area well. But that's the end of my presentation. I am more than happy to take any questions that there might be now. I unfortunately can't stay till the end of the meeting, but if anything else comes up later, I'm very happy for questions to be sent to me afterwards as well. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Hannah. I just have to say as well that Community Viewer app is really, really good. Especially for families where they've got like an elderly family member that lives on Foreman's Road. I know they can check the camera to make sure that that family member's safe at that time. And I quite looking at it because you can see how the water level changes on the river throughout the day, and you can check for fly tipping too, which is great. But I'll open it up to questions. So we've got a question from Chris.
Hi, Nicky, and hi, Hannah. I kind of thought it was best to introduce myself first. So I work for Indestructible Paint, on Pentos Drive. And of course, we're as supportive as we can be to communities prepared in terms of the work they're doing for us. So I just thought it'd make myself aware, make everybody aware of who I am. I know you've seen my colleague Steve Salter in the past as well. And if anybody wants any information and can't get to see Nicky, we've got the communities prepared postcards at Indestructible for Paint, so we're more than happy to share those. And of course, whilst flooding is a major risk, and we're sort of contacting local councillors and trying to rally MPs as well. We also have another number of community issues going on, as mentioned earlier on, like things like fly tipping, which we try and keep an eye on as well. So if anybody wants anything from Indestructible, do please get in touch.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for all your support for the wards from Indestructible.
As always, happy to.
I know. I'll have to come and sit down to see you soon. Do we have any other questions for Hannah at all? I think you might be lucky, Hannah. If we have any come through, I'll get them sent over to you to have them answered. But thank you so much for your presentation tonight, and thank you so much for your time.
That's great. Thanks everyone for having me. Okay, take care. Bye bye.
Bye. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is an update on the Commonwealth Games Fund from John.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just share a quick PowerPoint presentation. I'll try not to bore you all too senseless. Right, has that come through to everybody?
It hasn't yet.
How about now, Councillor?
I can still just see you.
How annoying. Bear with me, I'll try one more time, otherwise I'll just talk to you all.
We were doing so well as well to get through without any technical problems.
Oh, I'm always good at bringing things down to a low level. Bear with me a moment.
If it doesn't work, you can email it to me and I can share my screen.
I'll email it out anyway, Councillor. I would desperately try one more time. Bear with me. And then I will just bore you all senseless. No, for some bizarre reason, I'm locked out and it refuses to allow me to share.
Okay.
Okay, right. I will talk you all through it. I think that's the best thing to do. I'll put it up on my system so I can see it, even if you all can't. It's a magnificent presentation, by the way. I just thought I'd let you all know. Right. So Celebrating Communities Fund, what it's about? It's about to try and engage our local communities so that we get a little bit more oomph and a bit more willing where it comes to the games. Brummies have, and I am one of them, Brummies have a wonderful sceptical attitude to anything. So, and I think the Commonwealth Games has also been that, but it's a wonderful opportunity for the ward. The ward's actually going to get £35,000 of Commonwealth Games funding. Now, I would stress at this point, I'm not actually a Commonwealth Games officer, but I am here to try and support them and help them through the processes. So what is the Celebrating Community Small Grants Fund? It's a universal small grant award related to the City Council's role in hosting the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. It's been established to help communities carry out more localised activities, and it really is a community-based fund, this one. I've seen many funds over my far too illustrious and far too long career where it's been very much Birmingham City Council led. What we're trying to do in this case is make it as open and accessible for our local communities as we possibly can. Now, there are 3 active funds to it. There is a get active element to the funds, and you've got to be able to hit at least one of these headings. So get active, it's literally what they say on the tin. It's about trying to encourage participation, getting people up and running and active, and just getting that nice health feel going. And I'm sure Justin will be very proud of us for that. There's a second element, which is the ready, steady, fun element. And then there's a celebrating culture element. Now, the first round of funding has actually closed, but round 2 applications are actually open until November the 20th, the end of November of this year. So the first element is get active. As I said, it is literally what it said on the tin. It's about setting up community games and sports days. It's about getting people a little bit more active. It could be anything from developing 2K walks that we used to have in parks, or doing Tai Chi in the streets, or a lot of local schools and local groups are doing mini Commonwealth games where they're actually having mini sports events days. The second element is ready, steady, fun. This is about getting areas games ready. So that could be anything from spring cleaning, and I've already heard some of that what's going on in the ward, to having Commonwealth themed flower displays. I've seen a couple of applications that come in, and if they do what they say, it's going to be absolute jaw-dropping, because we've got some where they're doing huge flower displays in the colours and the style of the Commonwealth Games, which looks absolutely brilliant. But it's also about having fun. It's about having street parties that can celebrate the Commonwealth Games. And the third element is celebrating culture. Now, this is about Birmingham's place in the Commonwealth. And again, I've seen some brilliant applications coming in. We've even set up in one ward a large choir, and each individual element of the choir is going to pick a different country and a different style of singing and a different style of ethnic dress that relates back to the Commonwealth Games. So we're trying again to make it as wide and as wide as we possibly can for you all. The proposals, however, should be able to explain, and I can't stress how important this is, a link to the Commonwealth Games. I've seen some fantastic applications coming in, but they're not mentioning the Commonwealth Games. This is Commonwealth Games funding. So I've seen projects coming in that have talked about producing new open waterways, domestic abuse projects, but they don't have any relation to the Commonwealth Games. So please, 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 I've got to stress this. When the applications come in, think about how is your application going to fit to the Commonwealth Games? What's going to make that Commonwealth Games just that little bit better? Now, the funding, we're trying to keep it as wide as we possibly can, so that encourages core costs, revenue costs, new and existing projects, and one-off initiatives. Again, we're keeping it as wide as we possibly can. We will even take applications from community groups that don't have their own bank account, and we will go away and we will find a partner agency that we can actually feed that funding to, so they make certain it gets back to the community group. So again, we're keeping it as wide as possible as we possibly can for you all. Now, there's two ways to actually put your application in. There is a website, so you can go straight into Birmingham City Council's website for the Commonwealth Games, Celebrating Communities, and it's there. We've had a couple of glitches with it, and what I will do, Councillor, I will send out, as will Kay, all of the Word documents, because there's 3 different elements to the actual process, and then you can submit a good old-fashioned Word application form back to my unit, which is the ndsu@birmingham.gov.uk. There are 3 elements to the applications. There's funding up to £1,000. We're not asking a rocket scientist to write an application up to £1,000. Provided you can show a good connection to the Commonwealth Games, there's every chance that we'll do everything we can to support it. The second element is £1,000 up to £5,000. When we start talking about £5,000, and it is public money, even though it's the Commonwealth Games money, we start to look a little bit more into that. So we need to make certain that your costings are right. If you're talking about a capital project, we're going to need to see some sort of proof of what that capital is actually going to cost us. And the third element, it's what everybody seems to want because it's the larger amount, it's £5,000 up to a maximum of £10,000. And there is a ceiling at £10,000. And when we start to look at that, yes, you've still got to be able to prove that there is a Commonwealth Games connection. But we need to then start to look, is there some element of sustainability in there? Is there any form of match funding that comes in there? And the one thing I would say with match funding is don't just think it has to be a physical sum. It doesn't have to be pound for pound. It could be you've all got some fantastic volunteer groups out there. So volunteer time could actually be used as match funding. And whenever I write an application, I always use a volunteer time of £10 per hour. When you look at the questions, we're not trying to trip anybody up. I'm very mindful of my old teachers that used to say, when you do an exam question, read the exam question, then read the exam question, and then before you start anything, read the exam question. So please, please, please read it carefully. The worst thing you can do is rush in with a fantastic idea, but you haven't gone through the questions. They're very simple. They're simple headings, but give them a long time to think about it before you actually put the application in. We could do with some continuation and some legacy from that. So legacy can refer to what will remain after your project finishes. Will it be a new walking group formed, a piece of community art on display, a piece of green space transformed, or new links forged between the neighbours? So start to think about the legacy. What can be done from that? The phrase legacy games is coming up more and more in the city, so it's something that we need to think about. Now, what you've also got, because what we're trying to do is make this as community ready and as community accessible as possible, is we've got 2 local groups rather than Birmingham City Council, again, trying to dominate everything and run everything. We've got 2 groups that we've brought in to actually assist with this process. There's an organisation, it's a national organisation called Locality, and it's all on the slides, councillor, so when it comes out, everyone will be able to see it. And there's a second group called Birmingham Community Matters. Both these agencies will be helping community groups set up really good positive applications. They're also doing online sessions at the moment, so all you have to do is contact them on the emails that we'll send out and supply, and they can start to assist you before you actually get to submitting a formal application. So what happens when we do get to that stage? Well, all bids will be reviewed by Birmingham City Council staff appointed by the Commonwealth Games to make sure they fit the required criteria to be recommended. That's, again, is there a connection to the Commonwealth Games? Is it good value for money? Is the organisation legitimate? If they say they're a charity, are they registered at the Charities Commission, etc., etc., etc. And then what will then happen is my team then will arrange, once it's all been approved, a condition of grant aid, what's known as a COGA. Now, we're doing COGAs so that we can keep the process as quickly as possible. We can actually get payments into a bank account within 24 hours. But what we will be doing is we'll be making certain that if somebody says they're going to see 100 people, then we really do want to see 100 people, because we make certain it's value for money. We don't want an application form coming in saying we're going to engage with 100 people and then find only 10 people we're actually allocated with. But coming back again to the fact this is going to be Birmingham City Council run, a specific ward forum to discuss and approve the bids will be arranged and steered by an approved agency. Now, for this particular district, it's the Moseley Exchange team, and they will be contacting you all very much like we have tonight. So we'll send it out to everybody to say we're going to have a specific night when we start to look at the applications. Please come along so you can discuss it and talk to us about where you're going to be at with it. And that's a quick whistle stop tour, councillor. But I am open to many questions. I'm sure there's going to be lots, hopefully.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for John? Sarah, do you want to come in?
Hi, yeah, it's not so much a question actually, just as a general introduction to the group. I'm Sarah Robbins and I'm the Chief Exec of the Sparkhill project. We will be looking to make an application. We made an application in the first round, I have to say, which was unsuccessful. I think it perhaps wasn't Commonwealthy enough, John, okay. But that's how it goes. We will be making an application for some of you will know that we run an annual Creative Families Festival. We want to make an application to run that next year in the park on a kind of bigger, grander scale with the Commonwealth link there. But I also want to just kind of make an offer to residents that if you've got particular ideas of projects that you would want to consider as this, please do get in touch, because if it's something that the Sparkhill project can support or it fits with the work that we already do, then we'd like to work with local residents to develop more applications. I do have a question related to that, John, though, is that are we able to make more than one application as an organisation if it's doing different things?
Yes, the answer to that most is definitely yes, Sarah. And coming back again to your point about was it enough Commonwealth Games enough, I'll be running sessions because I actually have got a skill in bringing in external funding. And what I'm finding is we're getting quite a few groups that have got some really good ideas and they just haven't pitched it properly. So I'm going to be setting up some online forum groups. They're like a mini masterclass so that you can do it again for the Commonwealth Games, but it will be good to look for external funding advisors, agencies that are out there. There's 5,000 trust and grant organisations out there. So I'll be running some training sessions. So some of our groups, our community groups, get a better feel for what's actually looked for when you're writing an application.
Yeah. We do external funding applications all the time, but yeah.
And there's no excuse for getting it wrong on the Commonwealth Games, Sarah. I'm looking forward to your application.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Farina next.
Hi, John. Thanks for that introduction, because coincidentally, it's not a question. It's more of a thank you for bringing this to this particular meeting. We've just set up a new Friends of Readings Lane Park, which is actually at the top of Foreman's Road. It doesn't quite fit into. It's part of Sparkhill, but it's also part of Hall Green. So we definitely have some ideas, and I'll definitely would love to would join up in regards to your meetings around how Commonwealth Gamesy does the bid have to actually be.
And if you want to just send me an email, we can have a quick discussion about what you've got in mind as well.
Sure.
There will come a point where I can't help you actually. I mean, in the old days, I've been quite naughty and I've actually helped organisations write applications for, especially for external funding. But I might be, if I'm going to be one of the assessors, which is a possibility because there's a big pot of us at the moment, but I will certainly be able to assist and advise and sort of steer you in the right direction.
Yep. No, thank you so much. That's exactly what we need.
Excellent.
We're a bit new to this, so for sure, any guidance would help.
You will have it.
Thank you.
John, would you be able to let people know how they'd be able to contact you?
It'll be via email. I'll put it in the chat, but it's john.mole. That's M-O-L-E. No relation to Adrian for those that are over the age of about 40. It's john.mole@birmingham.gov.uk.
Just put it in the chat, Councillor.
Thank you very much. We've got a question from Shab that says, can schools apply for this funding?
Schools most definitely can, and we would welcome them, because what we want is to see some of our young people enthused and active when it comes to the Commonwealth Games. So that's a big tick in the box, most definitely.
Do we have any more questions for John? I don't think we do.
I've got a fart like you, Councillor.
Thank you very much for this. I think it's been really, really helpful, and I'm really excited to see what projects get put in and what gets funding. So that's something to look forward to. And yesterday it was a year to the Commonwealth Games, wasn't it?
I believe it was. Yes, I believe it was.
It was. So yeah, we will now move on to local updates. I don't know if the local police are here.
I don't think they are, Councillor Brennan, no.
Okay, I can give a quick update of things that are going on in the ward council-wise. So we have the cabinet member for highways visiting next week, and I'm going to take him round and look mainly around the Springfield Parade at highways issues around there, looking at the drainage on Foreman's Road, looking at the encroachment of the pavements, looking at some of the potholes and things, and having a look at the bit at the bottom of Oakwood Road that needs to be repaired. Highways have said that Shell Green Lane has been proposed for resurfacing on the 2021-2022 programme for resurfacing the road, and I will also push for Fernley Road to be resurfaced as well, because I know we had the petition for that go through. Gary Dalton, our highways engineer, who I'm hopefully going to have at our next ward forum, is also going for a walk around with me and local residents towards the end of August. And very exciting, my advice surgeries are returning in September, so they'll be at my usual place that I have them, which is at the Springfield Project, and it will be the first Friday of the month starting at 7 p.m. You don't need an appointment, you don't need to let me know you come in, you can just email, you can just turn up, and I'll be there to help you with any advice that you might need. So I will open it up to the group now. Does anybody want to share any local updates, things that are going on, issues that you might have? Because we've got about 10 minutes left. Mo, do you want to come in?
Oh, yeah. Could you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly fine, yes.
Yeah, just regarding this issue about drop curves, which the council allowed to happen in previous years, especially on Ivor Road, Esme Road, Avia Road and Doris Road. Because of the council allowed these drop curves to happen, they've lost vulnerable car parking spaces on the road. These drop curves, which were put in previously by previous councillors, pressured by previous councillors, the requirements are not met. Most of the cars on Ivor Road are overhanging on the pavements. So now going down with a pushchair with a disabled person as well, you can't go down on the pavements. So the council have all caused this issue, which needs to be rectified. So we're in a predicament now because they've changed the drop curve policies. It's got to be 4.75 meters to allow a drop curve, but previously they allowed them to happen. So when a highway agency or someone comes out, this issue needs to be addressed.
I think some of the drop curbs as well have actually been put in by contractors that aren't Birmingham City Council, especially on Ivor Road, and I will ask the drop curb officer to have a look and see which ones he can identify. I know that there's been 3 already that on that kind of block, not just on Ivor Road, on some of the roads around it, that they've had to pay to have the pavement put back the way it is and been fined. But if we know of any more that haven't been put in by the proper requirements, let me know and I can have them investigated.
No. Yeah,
and as I said, Gary Dalton, the highways engineer, I'm going to get him to come to the next meeting so we can ask him some questions about that.
Yeah, what it is, the previous drop curbs which were allowed by the council, the requirements were not met. Even allowed by the council dropped the highway department, have dropped the drop curves, and the requirement has not been met. These houses were not suitable for drop curves and off-road parking.
Okay, well, what I'll do is I'll get Gary to come to the next ward forum and answer questions, and we can ask him how he's going to sort that out.
Yeah, because finding out, I have took it further, speaking to Highways, Birmingham City Council, what was the chap's name? Forgot his name.
George?
Forgot his name. He goes
George.
He goes pressures from, it was Jerry Evans. They never let it happen. But the thing is, regulation rules are there for a reason. A professional organisation at Birmingham City Council shouldn't be following councillors' advice when the requirement ain't met.
Yeah, and they don't do that anymore.
No, but they've done it. So,
I know.
So it shouldn't have happened. So now what it is, they've lost vulnerable car parking spaces by allowing the drop curves on the road.
Yeah. Well, as I said, we'll get Gary to come and answer some questions about that at the next road forum.
Yeah, because we're having issues. We're having issues on these roads. People not allowing you to park on the drop curves. These drop curves, these so-called drives, you can't even park a small car on them. So I don't know how the council were blind enough to allow it to happen when they allowed the planning permission to go ahead with it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to the next update now to Abdul, as he had his hand up next.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, just a couple of quick follow-up questions, really. I want to give someone else a chance to speak previously. Was when there's, I forgot to mention, obviously there's been an increase in the area of fly tipping, and namely, obviously, mattresses, bed bases and fridges seems to be an increase over the last, obviously, sort of 18 months. Would obviously part of the dumping crew that he mentioned before, is that something that they will tackle? And if so, how do we sort of get in contact with them when we see something like that being dumped? Example is, obviously, I think you obviously noticed put up regarding on the Foreman's Road, loads of mattresses and bed bases about 7-8 days ago.
Yeah,
and they're still there.
Okay, I'll get that.
So I'd like to know, and this is not just like a one-off thing. I mean, yeah, we can get them moved. That's not a problem. But obviously, in terms of dumping crew, if they're there to tackle these kind of things, how would we, obviously, as a community, be able to contact them directly to get them obviously moved? Because some of the fridges have been there for months and been reported several times and haven't been removed by the council. I can name you 10, top of my head. I can give you locations that have been reported but haven't been removed.
That fridges come under Montague Street, which isn't under our usual depot, so it takes a bit longer. But if you tell me where
the working day, the actual working day is 10 days turnaround. These fridges have been reported for months, not 10 days, months. And we keep on sending, chaser emails and say we've noted, we'll come out again when no one does actually come out. So, the 10-day turnaround, I understand with the fridges is slightly longer, but these have been reported for months.
Okay, I'll get that traced up.
Thank you.
Because I'm sure they could come in one big go. If there's lots
it would make sense if we, I think if we can maybe get the pictures and locations and then obviously do it, and then rather than coming for one fridge, just come in and just do obviously around and collect them all in one go. That would save them time. and obviously it'll clear it up from the streets as well, because what it is attracting other rubbish, because people are starting putting rubbish in the fridges. So you know, one of the reasons why they weren't collected was, oh, the fridge was there, it's been 3 months, we can't collect it because there's rubbish inside it now.
Okay, well that's not really a good excuse at all.
And the other question, you mentioned about the cabinet member coming around, etc. Hopefully next week we're going to look at some stuff. And you mentioned about Oakwood Road, and obviously having an invested interest in that. What was the issue with Oakwood Road, at the bottom of Oakwood Road?
The resurfacing wasn't done properly. And
it's all done now. I emailed David Horner, which was obviously the manager. So he and I copied in the cabinet member, and they came out about 7-8 days ago and resurfaced the end of it from Oakwood Road to Stratford Road.
I think there's still some problems on the pavement side, but Dave said.
Oh, the pavement side, then that's something different. But can I just point out one more thing though? They've put some red lines. They've put some red lines in, which is fine. But when you're facing, if you can imagine, if you're facing Oakwood Road, facing Stratford Road, on the left-hand side, the red lines haven't been put back to where they were before. They just stopped at where the sort of corner finishes, but obviously you can see clearly it went a little bit further up, and the reason for that is because that's the way the car exits. When they're leaving that open, someone parks there, it just reduces that space of getting out of there.
Yeah, I'll bring that up with him as well.
Yeah, just the red lines, and that's apart from that, it's been resurfaced right at the end. They've done a good job, so that bit's all's been done, the main resurfacing. But there's other bits and bobs that need to be shown to him, that's fine. Thank you.
I'll go to Mohammed Wasim.
Hi Nicky, hi guys, I hope everyone is well. So I just wanted to really follow up, continue with one of the things that Abdul mentioned about fly tipping. So Nicky, obviously you know that back in April this year we launched the campaign about cleanliness. At that particular time we had a very, very good response from the public that if they were reporting on anything on Fix My Street, it was literally picked up within 72 hours. I've been approached over the last few weeks a few times by a number of residents that even though they're reporting it, it's not being picked up. And that's not only Sparkhill, it's on a Birmingham level. So I just thought I'd raise that even though we are encouraging people to report stuff when they see it, it's not really being picked up in the manner that it was back then. So I just thought I'd raise that point on the meeting as well today. And the second point I just wanted to quickly raise was about the bins. Obviously, I spoke to you, and one great thing that I think the council have, which really, really needs to be promoted, is the large bins. Because talking in Sparkhill, where a lot of the people are from the Asian community, with the Asian community, we normally have a number of generations under one roof. So there's 6 people, 7 people. So I think if that can really be promoted further, that if people have more than 6 people living in the house, they can apply for the large bin. That just obviously saves people from maybe dumping an extra bag on the road or on the side. So I really think that that's something that we really need to promote, especially in these areas, and encourage people to get larger bins. And I actually applied for it, and I think it was within a week we got it. So I think it's really useful for our areas to get that promoted.
I think it's larger bins, and you can have 2 recycling bins too.
Yeah,
it's really, really helpful, but I'll try and push that message out. I'm going to be doing some roving surgery, which is basically door knocking. So when I knock the doors, I'll let people know.
Yeah, and I just wanted to raise one final thing. Obviously, since the last meeting, there's something that we've seen on the rise, that's speeding. And unfortunately, we've had a number of incidents, fatalities as well in the Sparkhill area and around this side of Birmingham. So there's one thing that we had a meeting amongst the organisation members, and something that just came forward. I thought I'll mention it. If it can be done, it'd be great. Is that whenever we're driving on the Stratford Road in the mornings, especially, we always see the the CCTV cars where they monitor your speed. It's very, very good, but I feel that 9, 10, 11 o'clock, even though it's very good to have it at that time, a lot of the people are either at work or sleepy, but at night it's when it's really, really bad, especially on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. So it was just maybe a request, or just to put something forward, that yes, the mornings are effective, but obviously the evenings is when obviously we see a huge amount of people speeding, and the amount of speed that they're going at that time of night. So maybe if that kind of system can be brought in the evenings, I think it could save some lives, hopefully.
That's definitely something I can take forward, and I was hoping the police would be on so they could talk about Speed Watch, but they're not here this evening. But yeah, that's something I will get on to straight after this meeting, about asking them to come down and do some enforcement on the evening times, because that would be really helpful.
Yep, thank you.
But I don't think we have any more questions, so I am going to draw the meeting to a close. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and we're looking at towards the end of September for the next meeting, and everything tonight, all the presentations and things will be emailed out to the usual email list. And if you're not on the email list, just pop your email into the chat and we can get you added.
Quick question before you go, Nikki. Is the next meeting going to be online, or will that be face to face, do you think?
I'm not sure at the moment, but I'll let everybody know.
Okay.
It depends what the COVID situation is, I suppose.
Of course.
But yeah, my surgeries are back on and running from September. So come and see me about any issues. Okay, right, I will give it a minute just in case anyone wants to put their email address in. But as in Grove Road, as in the resurfacing.
Yeah, I know he's right. I think he is about the resurfacing. I think they've done a temporary job, sort of fixed some areas, but I think on the whole probably needs a resurface. But they've just come and done some temporary sort of fixes at the moment.
Well, I'm at Grove Road tomorrow on my walk around, so I will have a look. If anybody wants to see me on Grove Road, I'll be there from 11 o'clock.
No problem. I'll let them know. You're going to be at the bottom. You're starting from the bottom or the top? From Stratford Road or
I'll be on the Nansen Road corner at 11, but I'll be on the whole bit because I'm going to walk around the whole bit.
I'll let them know if they want to come and see you, they can. No problem. Thank you.
Yes, tomorrow at 11.
Yeah, excellent.
There we go. So you don't have to stay now if you don't want to.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Nikki.
Just waiting for the email addresses, but yeah, you can leave.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you very much.